Hi, welcome. I'm Jim Steyer. This is the chairwoman of the Federal Communications Commission, Jessica Rosenworcel. In my day job, yeah, I agree. I'm going to give her a better introduction than that. I'm the founder and CEO of Common Sense Media. I'm also a Stanford professor where I teach law and politics. And I said in the bigger panel that we did this morning, I don't know if any of you guys attended, that it's a historic moment that we have a woman, a mom, and an extraordinarily dedicated and experienced leader as the head of the FCC at this critical moment. And I mean a critical moment because we have the opportunity legislatively to do the most important technology legislation in the country in the next couple of years that will defend everybody, empower the rights of everybody in this room, but most of all our kids and families. And then we also have this extraordinary broadband plan that's going to, if executed well, close the digital divide once and for all in the country. So to have Jessica as the chair of the FCC at this moment, it's really a historic moment, is fantastic. So Jessica, let me start by asking you this. And I will call her Chairwoman Rosenworcel, but I have also been friends with her for a long time. Tell us a little about, I'd like to start by 2 minutes about how did you end up as the chair of the FCC? So a little background for people, so how you now have this extraordinarily important position. But it'd be good for you to just tell them for a second.
All right, well, it's good to be here. Appreciate that. And I actually prefer Jessica, which is just a few syllables, whereas Chairwoman Rosenworcel is really a all. Anyway, I did not have a master plan from the time I was young to be the first woman to lead the Federal Communications Commission. And by the way, I think it's important that people, and you're all in positions of influence, to sometimes talk about how serendipity led you to where you are. Otherwise, we leave young people with the impression that, there's only ladders upwards instead of moves occasionally sideways. I think that's really important. So one of the first sideways moves I had was when my personal life required me to move to Washington, D.C. years ago. I didn't want to go there. I was not the type of student who was in student government or ever aspired to be around the halls of power in Washington. But I wound up there, and some years later, I found myself working for the United States Senate Commerce Committee.
This is after law school.
Yeah, after law school. And I got to work on technology policy there, the digital television transition, the extension of broadband networks, and I convinced my boss at the time, former Senator Jay Rockefeller, that we should develop a nationwide network for first responders because it was one of the last outstanding recommendations from the 9/11 Commission that we had not acted on. And my own family had lost someone in the Twin Towers, and this resonated, and he let me go forward, and I managed to convince him and some other senators and eventually the White House, and it wound up in the State of the Union. And then President Obama invited me to join the FCC as a commissioner. I spent some time on the agency. I left. I came back during the Trump administration, and then President Biden appointed me the first woman in 87 years. I'm going to make up for lost time. That's my motto. But in any event, I think I have an incredibly exciting job. I think I don't have to explain it to people as we come out of this pandemic, which is that communications unites us. And we need connections, physical and digital, that bring us together right now. And as we come out of this time, it feels like we need to make it a national goal to connect 100% of us. And I think that goal is within reach. We've done it before with electricity, with basic telephony. Now we're going to do it with broadband, and I consider that one of the primary tasks as I run the agency.
And I also mentioned that you're a mom. Tell us why that matters a lot to you in the job you're in right now, because I actually think that's an incredibly important part of who you are and why you're going to be so effective in this job.
Well, I think anyone who works with young people or has young people in their household is constantly looking at the world through their eyes. It's something you said before when we were on the stage in the ballroom this morning. It's the task of leaving it better for the next generation. If you work with young people or you have children at home, I think you are thinking about that in everything you do. And it informs my thinking at the FCC in every way. And there was probably a time not that long ago when I was, careful about talking about being a mom. I'm so used to being the only woman in a room in technology but I think I've reached the point where now I talk about it a little relentlessly, because why not? If it's who you are and this is how you think, go right ahead. And when you look at the challenges we face, if we don't solve them for our young people, we're not going to solve them. And so I think about connectivity, digital skills, and access frequently through the eyes of young people. And candidly, I think we should ask all of our public servants to be doing that, because they're there to help shape the future, and I think it's important.
So you and I have talked a bunch of times about how the critical element right now is getting stuff done. So explain.
I think I used an expletive.
I agree. I did too. I was just being respectful to the people in the audience. You know what I.
You're all smart. You know
what I would have said. But that we completely agree on that. So outline the next 2 to 3 years, because this is an eminent. No, but just at a very high level, Jessica. What are the 2 or 3 things that have to happen for us to close the digital divide at a high level? These guys aren't all policy wonks. What are the 2 or 3 things we just have to get right?
Okay. Coming out of this moment, we've realized that the digital divide in the United States is very real and very big, and we're going to solve it. There's a consensus on that, by the way, left, right, Republican, Democrat. That's something to embrace. The digital divide, I think there's also been consensus that it's 2 things. First, we have a deployment challenge in rural areas of this country where that infrastructure is not present. We've got to build it. We've got to make sure it reaches the last house on the dirt road. We need to find ways to support its construction and support for the recurring costs of maintaining those networks. We're going to do that. But the second problem, which I think historically has gotten short shrift, is affordability. And we have been doing more on affordability during the last year since I've been at the helm of the FCC than I think the agency ever has in its history. Because digging trenches and laying fiber, that's going to take some time. But affordability, that's one of those things we might be able to do something fast. And I'm really proud that at the FCC we have done something fast. With the help of Congress, we've set up a program that's now known as the Affordable Connectivity Program. I wish that we had branding experts and we could rename a lot of programs that made its way through Congress.
Right.
But ACP, as it is known, is a program that helps low-income families get online and stay online. We've got more than 1,000 broadband providers nationwide participating. And basically, if you are on SNAP, Medicaid, you've got a Pell Grant, or you have a student in your household on free and reduced lunch program, you qualify. You can just get a broadband service with a $30 monthly discount. And many of our major broadband providers are offering service right at that $30 price point. We've tried to make the application as simple as possible.
It'll be free. So
it's
it'll be free to the consumer.
And by the way, that number actually goes up to $75 a month on tribal lands, which is an area where connectivity needs a lot of work. And so we are spending more time and energy there than ever before. But what I'm really proud to say is in less than a year, we've had 11 million households connected through this program. I want to give you a sense of how amazing that is. There's been a program to connect low-income households with voice telephony that's been around since 1985. I think we have 6.7 million households on that. So in less than a year, we got 11 million. That's a big deal. And now I think the challenge is figuring out how to get the next 10 million. And that's going to be a little harder. We're going to have to figure out how to find trusted actors in communities to get the word out, amplify the availability of this program, because it's no longer about just having a luxury connection in your house. This is about work. This is about school. This is about healthcare. Everyone needs it. So that's a big part of our agenda with the digital divide going forward. And then for me personally, I've always made it a priority to try to think about connecting kids and connecting schools. I have worked to update the E-rate program, which connects every school and library in this country to high-speed broadband, and I want to make sure that a great program like that continues to thrive. But I also want to spend some time making sure we solve the homework gap and get every child connected at home. I mean, we've got challenges in this country, but I don't think it's so audacious to say that every student in the United States of America should have a broadband connection at home. That is within our power to do.
Totally.
And I've been running a program with the help of Congress, again, I'd like to rename it, called the Emergency Connectivity Fund, for the homework gap, and we've connected more than 12 million students since we started that program. So there's still good to do out there, and we're not going to stop until we reach 100% of us. So those are front and center as I sit here before you.
And by the way, because we've been working on the E-rate stuff, and remember the lead commission that we did with you guys back in 2012 through 2014. Are we pretty well done with wiring the schools? I mean, are schools in good shape, and it's really now just finishing it off by getting the homes and consumers?
Well, first of all, you build a great program. This is true for every institution. You got to make sure you sustain it.
Sustain it, correct.
Washington isn't as great at setting up ribbon cutting ceremonies for the sustainability of programs. People like new programs. So it actually takes a lot of work to take a program and continuously modernize it and update it so it remains meaningful. And I think with respect to E-rate, we're going to have to take a fresh look at it over time to make sure that it works for educators, it works for those who are using it, that if there are ways we can simplify the application process, we should always strive to do that. Should we have higher speed targets and goals? What is the emergence of one-to-one learning mean within our school facilities, like in terms of the distribution of Wi-Fi routers? There's a lot of things we're going to have to do to update it over time. I also want to make sure that that program actually supports Wi-Fi on our school buses if it's in demand, because in rural communities, which are often the communities without connections, kids can spend an hour or more each way going to school and coming back. And we can turn that ride time into connected time for homework. And it can be, it can make a meaningful difference in a student's life pretty fast. So E-rate is one of those things we're going to update over time. And then we're going to have to take a hard look at the progress we made in the homework gap and how to sustain it.
So if you looked out at I'm going to ask a question specific about the audience next, but if you looked out at the next few years and you're being chairperson, in addition to closing the digital divide, what would you say the other 2 or 3 top priorities you have, so that when we gather here and say 2025, you would say, wow, we did those 3 things, and they are extremely important to the future of the country?
Okay, well, this is going to get nerdy really fast.
I'll prevent that.
Okay, the reallocation of our airwaves to maximize opportunities for both licensed and unlicensed activity. We have this incredible resource all around us. It's not distributed in ways that are necessarily optimal for this new world we're in. So how can we repurpose airwaves when necessary from old federal uses for new commercial ones? It's like a policy game of musical chairs. We keep on walking around and we're trying to figure out how everyone can find a place to sit even though there may not be enough seats. So it's challenging. So that's a big issue.
So it's really spectrum.
Spectrum
How do we
policy.
allocate the
Spectrum policy
in the way that makes sense for the next 25 years as opposed to...
Yeah, and that's also, what's the right allocations for satellite systems? We're seeing incredible growth in low Earth orbiting satellites. How do we make sure we update our policies, spectral and otherwise, to accommodate that? And so spectrum policy and making sure it's sufficiently modern. The United States has a history of leading on this. We started auctioning off airways in 1994. The rest of the world slowly followed. We were the first to set aside unlicensed airwaves, which became where Wi-Fi was born. We have done incentive auctions for spectrum policy. I just feel that we've been so creative when it comes to using this resource. It's not an accident that the app economy was born here. I'm sure a lot of people will talk about Silicon Valley and smartphones, but I'll talk to you about the 700 megahertz band and its early availability. I think these things play together, and we should build on that strength and bring connectivity to our lives in ways that are smart. Other things, we're going down the nerd corridor here.
They look like...
Yeah, all right. I really want to have a geocoded map of where broadband is and is not in every place in this country, and I want to use crowdsourced efforts to make sure that people tell us what's going on in their own backyard, so they update what carriers tell us in Washington. And we're doing a lot to try to build a broadband location fabric right now. I have carriers update it, and then I've got a contract out for an app for speed tests. This is so cool, I love it. Okay. So we're going to have an app that's available that you could just use in your phone in your backyard in your Wi-Fi network to tell you what the speed is that you're actually getting, right? Not just what they advertise, what you're getting. But it has this secondary function. It reports back to the FCC in an anonymized way So we're going to use everyone's data to update what we've been officially told. And I feel like if I can get that deployed and downloaded enough, we're going to do something neat. Like, we're going to build a broadband map that's not just carriers telling us what's going on. It's built by all of us, especially when it comes to wireless and its availability, because I think propagation models are really limited, and getting data from everyone in their backyard is going to be pretty neat. So mapping activities. I want to do more when it comes to media diversity. We have a real problem in this country.
Talk about that.
Yeah, my oversight over media is much more narrow than I think in popular imagination or my Twitter feed or E-Rape inbox would suggest. In many ways, we oversee the licenses of broadcast networks. And while there's like an infinite number of ways to watch right now, I still think we get a lot of our media through, or a lot of our news through local media like broadcasting. And, you know, historically, the ownership of those entities does not reflect the diversity of this country. And what you see on the screen says a lot about who we are as individuals, as community, as a nation. I mean, I grew up sitting down with my parents at 6:30 at night to watch three guys in their 50s with good heads of hair telling me what the news was. The world we're in is far more diverse. I just want to make sure that the ownership and the people who create get the opportunities to get on screen like that. So looking at independent production, broadcast ownership, just making sure that we've got some creative pathways to make sure that those activities are diverse. They're complicated things that are probably going to have to involve Congress and different kind of policies for deferring capital gains and sales of different stations, but it's something that I don't want to ignore. And then I want us to constantly be thinking about kids in the next generation and how all these technologies work or don't work for them, and what policies we can put in place to make sure that there's some equity of access for the good stuff.
So let me ask you a question about that. So, so I run the biggest kids media, kids tech group in the United States. So we get 50% of the feedback we'll get from our audience, right? 150 million users. Right now it's focused on TikTok and YouTube, right? So number one, please explain to the audience what jurisdiction you do or do not have over TikTok and YouTube. And then second, at a high level, as a parent who understands this, what do you think we should be doing? Because we, by the way, both work to regulate them and also work with both of those companies because we feel that's where their kids are not on Disney Channel and Nickelodeon anymore, guys. This is where they're living. So A, do you have any formal responsibility or ability to shape them? And B, as a mom, what do you think we should be saying to the folks who run those companies?
Oh my goodness. First, let me get the easy part. The Federal Communications Commission is like the network level. We're the pipes in the ground, the airwaves in the sky, the cable facilities that reach into your home, the satellite systems. We are not the services that ride on top of it. Those are our friends at the Federal Trade Commission. And this is a distinction that's often lost on people because, yeah, it's kind of technical, but it's an important one. So we don't have authority over those apps or the content there. And so, you know, an enormous part of the culture is, of course, moved to those. And my insights into it are only as someone who, you know, looks at what's going on and is a parent of kids who look at what's going on. But you know, I'm a firm believer that you're going to have some digital Sabbath in your life too. Put the thing down. Try to develop an attention span. Sometimes it's okay to read from the printed page and revisit the idea of physically holding a book. So those are things I try to model for my kids in my own life, but I won't tell you that I've got it all figured out. It's really hard.
And do you think and do you, because really that is, in the kids and family space, the number one issue that we hear we hear two issues, I would say. One, the impact of social media in general on kids. And second, I think this has been accentuated during the pandemic, but, you know, Vivek Murthy was here 2 nights ago. And Vivek knows this as well as any of the Surgeon General in the United States, talking about the mental health issues of kids, right? So, again, forget the jurisdiction issue. What should we be saying to the platforms about this from a kids and family perspective? Both the content that they're disseminating on their platforms to tens and tens and tens of millions of young people, and second, the impact on mental health of kids, which we've all seen has been such a dramatic shift in the last couple of years.
I feel like we're doing an experiment generationally on a lot of our kids in real time, the addictive qualities of these new forms of media. The opportunities, because those are also real, for connection. I mean, during the pandemic, I think it was an important way for my children to connect with people they couldn't see. And I think most new technologies bring upsides and downsides. And anyone who is only a techno-optimist, I'm suspect of, and anyone who's only a techno-pessimist, I'm equally suspect of. But I think we have to be, rather than toggling between enthusiasm and despair, I think we just have to recognize that this is what happens with new technologies that take hold in our culture and our households, and be thoughtful about how we use them. I don't know that I've figured that all out, but I do know that we can shape the way that we use these things. We can make policies as individuals, as a country in Washington that shapes how we use these things. And if they're influential in our lives, these are conversations we should be having.
So let me take it to the this is an ed tech conference.
This is outside of my jurisdiction.
I know, but it's I happen to know you're very smart about these things, even if they're not in your jurisdiction. And actually, I love hearing about, and this isn't in your jurisdiction, but this is really this question's about this conference. So you guys are all, in some way or another, related to the ed tech world, I would assume, because you wouldn't be here otherwise. So talk about how you view the potential of educational technology right now, and how that has changed, how your viewpoint on that has changed in the past couple of years, when we all had to live in a distance learning environment where, and I think I can't remember if it was John or Evan, whoever said it today, but now all teachers understand in a way they didn't 2 years ago that they are going to have to incorporate technology into the classroom. How do you see that playing out over the next 5 years? What would be advice you'd give to folks who are building companies in that space?
Well, first thing is I go back and think about what multimedia meant when I was in school, so I'll date myself. But there were like these film strips, right? And they were all about pilgrims, because I was from New England and that's what we talked about all the time, with really low production values. And there was nothing about it that really felt engaging. And when I see right now what's available, the narrative quality, the data that informs how we offer content, the interactivity, right, I feel like it's unbelievable. It's revolutionary. So we went into this pandemic, we were forced into it, and so many teachers and so many educators were forced to just take this digital leap and upgrade their skills and find ways to navigate what learning meant like in this new moment. And we're going to come out of it, and my hope is we take those best practices with us, because there's so much more engagement possible than those film strips. And if we've just had this big national exercise in accelerating what digital learning looks like, it's not going away. And it's part of the reason why I think continuing to focus on the homework gap is so important, making sure that every student that gets connected stays connected, because all of these new tools, they're going to continue to develop. And the teachers who've been using them are, I think, more open to their possibilities than ever before, because they were forced into it. But I think we have to sort of seize the fact that that happened and see where we can go from here.
And if there are a couple of things that you've seen evolve over the past few years that you think are really positive trends in education, what would be a couple of things that you really think are moving us in the right direction?
I've spent a lot of time with the E-rate program and talking about the homework gap, visiting with educators, and the things that stay with me most are what some teachers have told me. And I remember in a classroom in Arkansas, this teacher telling me that, she used to do these math exams, and some portion of the class wouldn't do well, and she might just sort of glance over it and try to get a sense of where she might not have taught the Pythagorean theorem well, or where there was some issue. And she said instead, when she had put certain homework and was able to digitize it and work with students, she was getting, her capacities for pattern recognition in her teaching were radically higher. Oh, it's clear that the students didn't understand this. I'm going to go spend more time on this because a significant number of them got this question wrong on this series of assignments and on this quiz. And her capacity to figure that out in a statistically valid way, rather than just eyeballing it, She said, made her a better teacher. And I was really struck by that because I think that that's a microcosm of what digitization can do for our economy as a whole, which is it can afford us a level of pattern recognition that we can't have casually. And if we have people who are willing to take a look and put it to use, we're gonna be better at instructing and more efficient with our time and almost everything we do.
So let me ask you a question that at a big picture level, and then we're going to actually take a few questions from the audience. That's not always normal at GSV, but we've got a really intelligent audience, so we're going to let you guys ask a few questions. But I want to ask you a global picture. So we, at Common Sense, we've opened offices in Brussels, London, and I was telling you we'll probably open offices in France and Germany. The reason being...
You just want to go there.
I do. The reason is because I really like the food in most of those places, and they're really fun to visit. But the other reason is that Europe has really moved forward ahead of the United States, whether it's on the privacy stuff, because we did the California law after GDPR, whether it's on the DMA and the DSA, which are clearly going to pass this year in Europe. And England, which is now apparently not part of Europe, is going to pass an online harms bill that will actually have really significant leverage over some of the tech companies. So I have a question for her. How do you see that in terms of pressuring the big tech companies? Most of you all don't represent the big tech companies in doing the right thing. And how do you see that global role and how the U.S. ought to respond to it? And I could ask that to Gina or something, but yeah. It's what's really going on, though, in the world right now.
I think what strikes me most is you see a lot of activity in California, in Sacramento, on these issues with the California privacy law.
I wonder why.
Yeah. You see a lot of activity in Europe, from GDPR to the Digital Services Act, Digital Markets Act, to the work in the UK to structurally develop apps that are for kids in a certain way with certain standards. And what you see in Washington is still a lot of disagreement on this subject. And no action is also action in and of itself, in that we're going to allow those other authorities to probably shape these spaces going forward. I would prefer there to be a national privacy policy in the United States. We don't have one. At a minimum, I would prefer there to be an update that was specific to kids.
Yep.
And I think an update of the Child Online Privacy Protection Act would be a good idea. But I am increasingly concerned that with other entities acting, they're going to shape what we are doing here without us affirmatively participating in that dialogue. That's not to say that any of these, it's not a commentary on what happens in California or what's happened in Europe, but I would like to see there to be more consensus to shape this set of issues, because what we're now seeing, for instance, on privacy in the states is some states passing fairly aggressive laws, like in California, some others that are passing less aggressive laws. And look, if you're going to build a product in the United States, that gets really complicated really fast. I'm a supporter of net neutrality policy. As a result of the rollback during the last administration, we now have policies in some states and not in others. Yeah. I think that on some of these issues, we need a baseline national policy, because I think that's good in terms of guaranteeing rights, but I also think it's good for commerce, and that you can comfortably know what policies are in every state across the land, and there's some benefit when we think about these things as having a baseline, and that requires Washington to step in.
And by the way, I would just add, so as you know, Jessica, the polling on this is the public is 85% with this. It's really remarkable, because we've done a bunch of polling over the last year. And this is across the political spectrum, the geographic spectrum of the United States. This is not a Republican or Democratic issue. This is not a liberal or conservative issue at all. And yet Washington, the political leadership, is still deeply divided over it, and in a way that's pathetic. Because
what do you really think?
What do I really think? I could more strongly than the word pathetic. But because the public is there. The public actually knows this. And they don't have to understand the specifics of privacy policy, but they know it's insane that we had to go and write a law in California, which is exactly what Common Sense did, because we couldn't get it done in Washington, D.C. And one thing I just would say to you guys, and then I want to ask you for questions, is you have the ability to influence that. The next few weeks and month or two are going to be critical right now about whether or not this happens in the United States. Because come June, it's over. People are going to be campaigning. I mean, it's been very hard to get stuff done post-June on these issues. And there's legislation on the table right now that addresses all of what Chairwoman Rosenworcel just said. And I would just say to you that you ought to, if you're in this field, you ought to be aware of that, and you ought to speak up to whoever you have access to, because those decisions are going to get made, and it's largely a function of the dysfunction in Washington political circles. And I'm not referring to...
Let me just also say, these issues are hard, you know?
Yeah.
That's the one thing I'd say
They are.
in defense of people working on them. Finding consensus about, you know, what do you think privacy should look like in a digital world? That's really hard. There's a lot of data collected around us. We all walk around with devices that can tell us where we are at any given moment in time. These are problems we haven't faced historically, and developing consensus on how that can be, it's just really difficult. And in defense of the slowness, I think that absence of consensus is just a function of how hard some of these issues are.
I agree, and as someone who has to negotiate some of them,
Yeah.
I agree, but I also say they're eminently solvable.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to watch other jurisdictions do that, so I agree with you about it. But I guess I just want to say that these are complex issues.
They are.
And look, it's within our power to do hard things. So I absolutely think we should. But I want to acknowledge, you know, when it comes to privacy, there's stated preferences and revealed preferences. There are what people say they want and what people say they actually do.
True.
And there are location services that can find you when there's a fire and you call 911. And then, you know, if that same functionality can be used to harm people or threaten them, that's a problem. How do we navigate between those things? I would just say that some of this stuff is complicated. Doesn't excuse us for not acting on it, but I want to acknowledge its fundamental complexity.
I completely agree with you, Jessica. Okay, let's do this. Let's take a couple of questions from the audience, because I have a last question to end this with, but sure. And why don't you say who you are?
Sure, Philip Neufeld, I'm with Fresno. Thank you, Philip Neufeld, I'm with Fresno Unified School District. I'm leading the Fresno Coalition.
Which Fresno?
Fresno Unified, yeah, and I'm leading the Fresno Coalition for Digital Inclusion. Happen to serve on Shelby's board as well. First of all, Chairwoman Rosenworcel, I have 2 daughters and I'm a father, and I'm so glad we have a woman leading the FCC, but also your wise and prudent policies are so important to school districts, to anchor institutions, and how we serve our communities, because it's really going to be through anchor institutions who care enough about equity, who are bold enough to, you know, we put up our own LTE network. We've had Wi-Fi on buses for the last 6 years. But that's still not entirely enough without open access last mile networks in urban areas of high poverty. So the one thing I'll ask is, well, I also just want to let you know, we've actually built 2 apps, a Chrome app and a Windows app that we call it MyQOI, it's open source, that does the piece to gather data. We've got over 4 million rows this year that show the underserved. And the underserved are in areas of high urban poverty. And the FCC maps and even our state maps, for example, in Fresno, say 5,000 or less. My data is showing with the multi-tenant dwellings and the students that we probably have somewhere between 10 to 75,000 people who are underserved in a city of 500,000. So I'm completely pleased with the speed at which you're moving around that. But you know,
what's your question?
My question is, in areas of high urban poverty, what can we do to open up the stranglehold that that incumbents have that aren't delivering services to people where the marginal returns aren't sufficient?
So, first of all, thank you for everything you're doing and your recognition that anchor institutions are really fundamental when it comes to deploying broadband and making it incrementally less expensive to reach the community. It's really valuable. One of the things that we just did within the last 2 or 3 months at the FCC is we decided to attack this problem. 1/3 of American households are in apartments or multi-tenant units. And an increasing number of building owners and landlords set up sweetheart deals with one broadband provider. So you move in, you don't have any choice. And I'm sure that works out great for whoever owns the building. But it's not so great for a consumer. First of all, they should have choice. Choice lowers, more competition, lowers prices, makes things more available. And plus, the environments where the economics most likely favor choice and even redundant infrastructure are multi-tenant units where you have a lot of people in a small location. So I'm fairly proud we did this on a bipartisan basis at the agency. We went and we changed our policies for prohibiting exclusives in buildings, trying to prohibit the kind of financial arrangements that get around a prohibition, like sale and lease back of facilities and the like. And so that's a first effort at trying to stop that problem and help provide more consumer choice and induce more construction in environments that are more hospitable to it, just in the nature of having so many people in a single location.
Great. How about one more good question from the audience? Tell us who you are.
Hi, Susan Walters from the California Emerging Technology Fund.
Okay.
Nice to see you. Thanks. I have maybe a couple questions, but let's see. The first one really is around ACP, and very excited to hear you promote it in the context of home internet. It's our impression, but we would love to have actual data from the FCC to understand whether people are using the benefit for their mobile phone or for their home, because our impression is that most people are using the benefit for mobile, and there are all kinds of problems there. And I think that while people, when they sign up for ACP, don't indicate what they're doing with it, that there ought to be some way to glean some of that information. And so I'm wondering if you're thinking about that, can we move in that direction? Do you want some help thinking about it?
Yeah, we are thinking about it. So there are a few things, though, that constrain our efforts in this area. Like the first one is the law itself. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the earlier appropriations bill that established this is neutral as to technology, and that it made the Affordable Connectivity Program available for mobile as well as home wired services. It did, however, offer a discount off of a tablet or laptop computer, so the discount off of a device only applies for a wired service. But the law was neutral between the two of them, and so we were required to set it up in a way that respected that. In terms of collecting data, the best probably way to do it is to start studying the providers, because we can look at the name of a provider and we have a pretty good sense of what it is that they're making available to consumers. It's something that we're studying, but I might want to rework the program in a perfect world where you had a program specifically for mobile and then you had a separate program for wired. But what I have instead is a program where Congress contemplated both, and we have taken the position that we want to support connectivity in any form and put competitive pressure on the availability of services that have higher download and upload speeds. And so that's where we are at present. There are definitely other ways to do it, and I take your point that, were we to rewrite this law, we would certainly take that into consideration.
Right, so in terms of the $100 million the FCC has authority to spend on advertising, is there an opportunity to promote home internet there? And then the other piece of my question was about the devices. Cox is the only major provider that is offering devices, and I'm wondering, with your influence and wisdom, how you can bring pressure to the others, because that device benefit is essentially crossed out for millions.
So we have been encouraging others to do it, but it is voluntary under the law. We do put up information on our webpage that's broken down by state that tells you which providers offer a device discount and which don't. It's intended to be right there out in the open to try to put some pressure on everyone to consider doing that. It is a challenge. I think the device component is new. I think we're going to also have to study those who are making it available. How's it going? Who has best practices? What's the price point at which we create a real value proposition for this low-income household? And candidly, it's something I'd like us to get the GAO or someone else to study, because I think we'll see more programs like this in the future, and I think it should be informed by what happened with this one.
So I'm going to ask the final question, which is this. So at some point in the not-too-distant future, someone is going to write the legacy of Jessica Rosenworcel. And the first line, significantly, I will bet you will be
Sounds like a bad country
the
song.
first woman chair of the Federal Communications Commission, okay? what will the second line be? What will you have done that will be as symbolic?
It's going to be where you started. She got done.
That's right. What? Okay, so number one is what she was, but what will the second line be that you got done?
I want to connect every student in this country, no matter who they are, where they live, where they came from. It's within our power to fix that right here, right now. And that has always animated my work at the FCC, but coming out of this pandemic, we're just on fire. We're going to make it happen.
Well, see, that is a really good moment to end on. And thank you. We are I was going to say this. We are really lucky that Jessica Rosenworcel is the chair of the FCC. And it's up to you all to do something to support what she just talked about, including areas where she doesn't have jurisdiction, but she has wisdom and knows what needs to be done. Thank you guys very much.